All right, today we're diving deep into one of the biggest, most argued about questions in all of fitness. How often should you really be training a muscle if you want to get the most growth possible? For years, the answer seemed pretty straightforward, something passed down in the gym from one generation to the next. But as we're about to find out, the actual science tells a much more interesting story. It's a story of discovery, of course correction, and ultimately a way smarter way to build your body. So let's get into the evidence. Look, you're already putting in the hours. You're showing up. But here's the nagging question. Is your training split actually optimized? I mean, are you potentially leaving muscle on the table by sticking to an old school approach? Or maybe even going the other way, training too much and just crushing your ability to recover? See, this isn't just about working hard, it's about working smart. And today, we're going to use the science to build a blueprint for what smart training really looks like. So here's our roadmap for today. First, we're going to tackle the classic bro split, the 1 day a week approach, and understand why it got so popular. Then we'll see how science started to poke holes in that old idea. After that, we'll uncover what the real driver of muscle growth is, and trust me, it changes the entire conversation. From there, we'll get super practical, talking about how to structure your training for way better results and faster recovery, before finally we put all those pieces together so you can walk away knowing how to build a split that's perfect for you. And just as we're getting started on this journey, if you get value from this kind of deep, evidence based content, doing this simple stuff like hitting the like button really does help the channel out. So before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. Your support is what makes all this possible. Okay, so our story has to start where most of our fitness journeys probably did, with the one training split that has absolutely dominated bodybuilding culture for decades. You've heard of it, you've seen it, you've probably even done it yourself. Let's talk about the bro split. The logic on the surface makes perfect sense, right? You dedicate one entire training day to obliterating one muscle group. You know the drill. Monday is chest day, Tuesday is back, Wednesday is for legs, and so on. The goal is just complete and total annihilation. You hit that muscle from every angle, with every machine and free weight you can think of until you can barely move it. Then you give it a full week to recover and grow, and you do it all over again. It's simple, it's intuitive, and hey, it's built some of the best physiques the world has ever seen. And make no mistake, this wasn't just some fringe theory. It was the gold standard. A 2013 survey of over 100 competitive bodybuilders found that a whopping 69% of them were following this exact train it once a week method. I mean, think about that. These are the people whose entire careers are built on building muscle, and the vast majority of them were all in on this approach. It was, without a doubt, the king of training splits. So here's the thing. We can't argue that this method can work. The proof is walking around in pretty much every gym on the planet. But if we're really trying to optimize everything, we have to ask a tougher question. Just because something can work, does that mean it's the best way? Is it the most efficient, most effective way to signal your body to grow? And that's the question that got researchers thinking, and it's the question that leads us to our next chapter. For the longest time, this 1 day a week model was just accepted as fact, based more on tradition and what the biggest guy in the gym was doing than on any hard data. But that was all about to change, because a new wave of researchers decided to put these old beliefs to the test. And the first major shot across the bow came in April of 2016. A huge study was published, led by one of the top researchers in the field, Brad Schoenfeld. Now, this wasn't just some small one off study, this was a meta analysis. That means these guys went out and gathered up all the best existing research on the topic and combined all the data to see what the overall picture looked like. It's one of the most powerful tools we have in science to get a really solid answer. And their mission was crystal clear. They basically said, look, there are a bunch of different knobs you can turn in your training program to try and get more muscle. And one of the biggest knobs we're interested in is frequency. They wanted to cut through all the gym floor chatter and just use the data to figure out if how often you train a muscle really matters. So their method was really smart. They found 10 high quality studies where one group of people trained their muscles just once a week, the classic bro split, while another group trained their muscles more often, either twice or even 3 times a week. Now, the really important part here is that they made sure the total amount of work, the total sets and reps, was the same for both groups over the week. This was a true apples to apples comparison of just frequency. So, with all the data from these 10 different experiments pulled together, the researchers ran the numbers. And what they found, well, it sent a ripple through the entire fitness industry because it flew directly in the face of decades of what everyone just assumed was true. And here it is. This is the number that started to change everything. 3.1%. Now, I know what you're thinking. It doesn't sound like a huge number, but in the world of muscle growth, where we fight for every little edge, an advantage like this, found consistently across multiple studies, is a very, very big deal. So, what does that 3.1% actually mean in the real world? It means that when you take the same amount of weekly work, the people who spread it out over 2 or 3 sessions saw, on average, 3.1% more muscle growth than the people who crammed it all into one day. For a new lifter, that could easily be an extra pound of pure muscle in their first year. That's a difference you can literally see in the mirror. The evidence was pretty clear. Higher frequencies seem to be better. So the next obvious question is why? Why would hitting a muscle more often be better? Well, the leading theory is all about a process called muscle protein synthesis, or MPS. The easiest way to think about MPS is as the on switch for building muscle. After you work out, your body flips this switch on to start repairing and rebuilding the muscle bigger and stronger. But here's the catch: that switch doesn't stay on forever. The research shows it's elevated for about 36 to 48 hours, then it goes back to normal. So the theory was if you only train a muscle once a week, you're only turning on that growth switch for 2 days, and then it's off for the next five. But if you hit it more often, you could keep that growth signal turned on much more consistently throughout the week. So, with all this evidence and a pretty solid reason why it works, the case seemed pretty much closed, right? The old bro split was out, and training everything at least twice a week was the new, scientifically backed rule. But, as it often happens in science, the story wasn't quite over. Just when we thought we had the final answer, some new information came to light that added a really important twist to this whole story. That 2016 study was a massive leap forward, for sure. But science is a process, it's always evolving. Researchers kept at it, they ran more studies, they collected more data, and this led to a really critical update to our understanding, one that shifted the focus away from frequency itself and onto something even more fundamental. This is just a perfect example of the scientific process at work. In 2016, we got our first big clue. It looked like higher frequency was the winner. But just 3 years later, in 2019, that same team, led by Brad Schoenfeld, came out with a new, even bigger meta analysis. This time, they had way more studies to look at, 25 in total, which gave them even more statistical power to see what was really going on. And this is where the story got really interesting. Here it is, the big takeaway from that 2019 paper. It says there's strong evidence that frequency does not significantly impact muscle growth. But here's the giant asterisk: when volume is equated. Now, at first glance, that sounds like it completely contradicts the 2016 study, but it's not a contradiction. It's a clarification. And it's the piece of the puzzle that makes everything else make sense. Okay, so let's put these two findings side by side, because this is the real aha moment. The 2016 data suggested that higher frequency was just better, but the bigger, more powerful 2019 analysis gave us the nuance. It wasn't that hitting a muscle more often was some kind of magic trick, it's that hitting it more often is a really effective way to get in more high quality training volume throughout the week. The new, more accurate conclusion was this: if you can get in the same total weekly volume with good intensity, it doesn't really matter if you do that in one marathon session or spreads it out over 2 or 3. And this brings us to the new hero of our story: training volume. Simply put, volume is just the total amount of work you do. The easiest way to think about it is sets times reps times weight. That number, sometimes called tonnage, is the primary signal we send to our body that tells it, hey, you need to grow bigger and stronger to handle this. And this right here, this is probably the most important takeaway of this entire explainer. The goal of your program is not to hit a muscle X number of times per week. The goal is to accumulate enough high quality volume every week to force it to grow. Frequency isn't the goal. It's a tool. It's a strategy we use to organize that volume in a way that lets us perform our best and recover properly. Okay, so we've established that volume is king. Now, as we're about to shift gears and get into how to actually apply all this stuff, if you're getting something out of this breakdown, please take just a second to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And before we dive in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. All right, let's get into how to put this to work. So now that we know that volume is what we're really chasing, the whole question changes. It's no longer about how often should I train. Now it's about how can I cleverly structure my week to get in all the volume I need and still be able to recover and grow? And this is where we get into smart program design, and we're going to lean on some very new research, including a 2024 review from Souza and his team that's all about recovery. This is the $1 million question for anyone who takes their training seriously. We know we need high volume for the best results. Most of the research points to somewhere between 10 and 20 hard sets per muscle per week. But you know as well as I do that trying to cram 20 sets of chest into one single workout on a Monday is a recipe for junk volume, feeling wrecked for days and having it bleed over and ruin the rest of your workouts for the week. So, how do we find that balance? Well, that 2024 review gives us some great clues. It reminds us that not all volume is created equal in terms of how much it beats you up. First, there's how close you train to failure. Going to absolute failure on every set generates way more fatigue than leaving one or two good reps in the tank. Second is just the sheer number of sets you do in one workout. And third is the kind of exercises you choose. Big, heavy compound movements like squats and deadlifts are just way more taxing on your entire system than something like a bicep curl. The type of work you do is just as important as the amount. And this is where smarter programming methods come in. One of the most effective is called daily undulating programming, or DUP for short. Instead of doing, say, 4 weeks of high rep training and then 4 weeks of heavy low rep training, DUP has you vary the focus within the same week. So one day might be a classic hypertrophy day, another day might be focused on pure strength, and maybe a third day is all about power and moving lighter weight fast. It's a way to manage different types of stress across the week. And what's really fascinating is how you can organize these days to boost your recovery. A more traditional DUP model might have you do 2 really hard days back to back, like a high volume hypertrophy day followed by a super heavy strength day. But a 2016 study proposed this modified HPSS model. Notice the difference? They brilliantly stuck the easier, less fatiguing power day right in the middle of the 2 hardest workouts of the week. What the HBS model does is it basically uses that power day as a form of active recovery. You're still getting good work in, but it doesn't beat you down systemically. This lets your body recover better from that hard hypertrophy day, so when it's time for your heady strength day, you're fresher and stronger. And in fact, that study found that the group using the HPS model actually got in more total volume and made better strength gains. It's a perfect example of thinking about the entire week, not just one workout at a time. All right, we've walked through the history, we've gone through the science, we've talked about the theory. Now it's time to land the plane. Let's take all of these principles and turn them into simple, actionable plans that you can use to build your own perfect training week. So here it is, your 4-step blueprint. Step 1, you've got to decide on your volume target. A good starting place for most people is somewhere in that 10 to 20 hard sets per muscle group per week range. Step 2, pick a frequency. And this is all about your life. How many days can you realistically get to the gym? Be honest. Step 3, take your target volume and just divide it up across those days. And step 4, and this is the really smart part, arrange those workouts intelligently. Don't put your 2 hardest, most draining workouts right next to each other. Use ideas like that HPS model to give yourself a fighting chance to recover. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, if you only have 3 days a week, a full body split is fantastic. You hit everything 3 times a week, which is great for spreading out volume. If you've got 4 days, the classic upper lower split is maybe one of the most effective splits ever created. Everything gets hit twice a week. And even if you have 5 days and you like that body part feel, a split like push-pull legs followed by an upper and lower day ensures pretty much every muscle still gets hit about twice a week. You get your volume in without killing yourself. So, after this whole journey through decades of science, here's the real bottom line. There is no such thing as one single best split for everybody. The best split for you is the one you can stick to. It's the one that fits your life, the one you actually enjoy doing, and most importantly, the one that lets you hit your volume targets week in and week out and recover well enough to come back stronger. Consistency and personalization will always beat chasing some perfect program you found online. So we've gone way beyond that simple question of how many days a week, and we've landed on a much smarter understanding of volume and recovery and intelligent programming. You have the principles now. You have the frameworks. The only real question left is, what are you going to build with them? How are you going to design your training to finally get the results you've been working for? And on that note, if you want to keep building your knowledge with breakdowns just like this one, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. So to continue your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And check out the links in the description if you're looking for a real estate agent in your market or you need life insurance. My team and I can help you anywhere nationwide. Thanks for tuning in. Now go build yourself a smarter week.